Ludwig van Beethoven, baptized in December 17, 1770, died in March 26, 1827, was a German composer and pianist. Beethoven remains one of the most admired composers in the history of Western music. His work rank among the most performed of the classical music repertoire and spanned the transition from the classical period to the Romantic era and classical music. His career has conventionally been divided into early, middle, and late periods. His early period, during which the form described, is typically considered to have lasted until 1802. From 1802 to around 1812, his middle period showed an individual development from the styles of Joseph Haydn and Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, and is sometimes characterized as heroic. During this time, he began to grow increasingly deaf. In his late period, from 1812 to 1827, he extended his innovations in musical form and expression. Beethoven was born and born. His musical talent was obvious at an early age. He was initially harshly and intensively taught by his father, Johann van Beethoven. Beethoven was later taught by the composer and conductor Christian Gottlob Neff, and under whose tutelage he published his first work, a set of keyboard variations, in 1783. He found relief from the dysfunctional home life with the family of Helen Ben Brunwing, whose children and he loved, befriended, and taught piano. At age 21, he moved to Vienna, which subsequently became his base, and studied composition with Haydn. Beethoven then gained a reputation as a virtuoso, patronized by Karl Alois, Prince Lichnowsky from compositions, which resulted in his three opus 1 piano trios, the earliest works to which he accorded an opus number in 1795. His first major orchestral work, the First Symphony, premiered in 18,000, and his first set of string quartets was published in 1801. Despite his hearing deteriorating during this period, he continued to conduct, premiering his third and fifth symphonies in 1804 and 1808, respectively. His violin concerto appeared in 1806, his last piano concerto, number 5, Op. 73, known as the Emperor, dedicated to his frequent patron Archduke Rudolph of Austria, was premiered in 1811. Without Beethoven as a soloist, he was almost completely deaf in 1814, and he then gave up performing and appearing in public. He described his problems with health and his unfulfilled personal life in two letters, his Heiligenstadt testament in 1802 to his brothers and his unsent love letter to an unknown immortal beloved in, 1812. After 1810, increasingly less socially involved, Beethoven composed many of his admired works, including later symphonies, mature chamber music, and the late piano sonatas. His only opera, Fidelio, first performed in 1805, was revised to its final version in 1814. He composed Missa Solemnis between 1819 and 1823 in his final symphony number 9, one of the first examples of a choral symphony, between 1822 and 1824. Written in his last years, his late string quartets, including the Grosse Fuge of 1825 to 1826, are among his final achievements. After some months of bedridden illness, he died in 1827. Beethoven's works remain mainstays of the classical music repertoire.
Life and career, family, and the early life. Beethoven's birthplace at Bongazi 20 Bonn, now the Beethoven House Museum. Beethoven was the grandson of the Ludwig van Beethoven, a musician from the town of Mechelen in the Austrian Duchy of Brabant, in what is now the Flemish region of Belgium, who had moved to Bonn at the age of 21. Ludwig was employed as a bass singer of the court of Clemens August, Archbishop-electo of Cologne, eventually rising to become in 1761 Kapellmeister, music director, and hence a preeminent musician in Bonn. The portrait he commissioned of himself toward the end of his life remained displayed in his grandson's rooms as the talisman of his musical heritage. Ludwig had two sons, the younger, which is Johann, worked as a tenor in the same musical establishment and gave keyboard and violin lessons to supplement his income. Johann married Maria Magdalena Kievrich in 1767. She was the daughter of Heinrich Kievrich, 1751, who had been the head chief at the court of Johann IX Philipp von Walderdorf, Archbishop of Trier. Beethoven was born of his marriage in Bonn at what is now Beethoven House Museum. Bones raised 20. There is no authentic record of the date of his birth, but the registry of his baptisms in the Catholic parish of Saint Remigius on 17 December 1770 survives, and the custom in the region at the time was to carry out baptisms within 24 hours of birth. There is a consensus with which Beethoven himself agreed that his birth date was 16 December, but no documentary proof of this. Of the seven children born to Johann van Beethoven, only Ludwig, the second born, and the two younger brothers survive infancy. Caspar Anton Karl, generally known as Karl, was born on 8 April 1774, and Nicholas Johann, generally known as Johann, the youngest, was born on 2nd October 1776. Beethoven's first music teacher was his father. He later had other local teachers, the court organist Gilles van den Eden, 1782, Tobias Friedrich Pfeiffer, a family friend who provided keyboard tuition, Franz Rovaniti, a relative who distracted him in playing the violin and viola. The court concertmaster Franz Anton Ries for the violin. His tuition began in his fifth year. The regime was harsh and intensive, often reducing him to tears.
Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, born on January 27, 1756, died at December 5, 1791, baptized as Johannes Chrysostomus Wolfgangus Theophilus Mozart, was a prolific and influential composer of the classical period. Despite his short life, his rapid pace of composition resulted in more than 800 works of virtually every genre of his time. Many of these compositions are acknowledged as pinnacles of the symphonic, concertante, chamber, operatic, and choral repertoire. Mozart is widely regarded as among the greatest composers in the history of Western music, with his music admired for its melodic beauty, its formal elegance, and its richness of harmony and texture. Born in Salzburg, then in the Holy Roman Empire, Mozart showed prodigious ability from his earliest childhood. Already competent on keyboard and violin, he composed from the age of 5 and performed before European royalty. His father took him on a grand tour of Europe and then 3 trips to Italy at 17. He was a musician at the Salzburg court but grew restless and traveled in search of better position. While visiting Vienna in 1781, Mozart was dismissed from his Salzburg position. He stayed in Vienna where he achieved fame but little financial security. During his final year there, he composed many of his best-known symphonies, concertos, and operas. His His requiem was largely unfinished by the time of his death. At the age of 35, the circumstances of which uncertain and much mythologized. Life and career. Mozart's birthplace at Gett-Redigast, 9 Salzburg, early life, family, and childhood. See also Mozart name and Mozart family. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart was born on 27 January 1756 to Leopold Mozart (1719 and 1785) and Anna Maria Nepertel (1720–1778) at Gett-Redigast 9 in Salzburg. Salzburg was the capital of the Archbishopric of Salzburg, an ecclesiastic principality in Holy Roman Empire. Today in Austria, he was the youngest of 7 children, 5 whom died in infancy. His elder sister was Maria Anna Mozart, born in 1751, died 1829, nicknamed Nannerl. Mozart was baptized the day after his birth at Saint Rupert's Cathedral in Salzburg. The baptismal record gives his name in Latinized form as Johannes Chrysostomos Wolfgangus Theophilus Mozart. He generally called himself Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart as an adult, but his name had many variants. Leopold Mozart, a native of Augsburg, then an imperial free city in the Holy Roman Empire, was a minor composer and other experienced teacher. In 1743, he was appointed as the fourth violinist in the musical establishment of Count Leopold Anton von Firmian, the ruling prince archbishop, the ruling prince archbishop of Salzburg. 4 years later, he married Anna Maria in Salzburg. Leopold became the orchestra's deputy kapellmeister in 1763. During the year of his son's birth, Leopold published a violin textbook, Versationnier Grandelichnil Violonchule, which achieved success. When Narnell was 7, she began keyboard lessons with his father, while her 3-year-old brother looked on. Years later, after her brother's death, she reminisced. He often spent much time at the clavier picking out thirds which he was ever striking, and his pleasure showed that it sounded good. In the 4th year of his age, his father for a game as it were began to teach him a few minutes and pieces at the clavier. He could play it faultlessly and with the greatest delicacy, and keeping exactly in time. At the age of 5, he was already composing little pieces, which he played to his father who wrote them down. The Mozart Family on Tour, Leopold Wolfgang and Nannerl Watercolor by Carmontel, 1763. These early pieces K1 to 5 were recorded in the Nannerl Notenbunch. In, not, in the Nannerl Notenbach. There is some scholarly debate about whether Mozart was 4 or 5 years old when he created his first musical composition, though there is little doubt that Mozart composed his first 3 pieces of music within a few weeks of each other, 1A, 1B, and 1C. In his early years, Wolfgang Fathers was his only teacher along with music. He taught his children language and academic subjects. Solomon notes that while Leopold was a devoted teacher to his children, there is evidence that Mozart was keen to progress beyond what he was taught. His first ink-spattered composition and precocious his first ink-spattered composition and his pro- precocious efforts with the violin were of his initiative and came as a surprise to Leopold, who eventually gave up composing when his son's musical talents became who eventually gave up composing when his son's musical talents became evident.
Franz Joseph Haydn, born in March 31, 1732, died in May 31, 1809, was an Austrian composer of the classical period. He was instrumental in the development of chamber music such as the string quartet and piano trio. His contribution to musical form have led him to be called the father of the symphony and father of the string quartet. Haydn spent much of his career as a court musician for the wealthy Esterhazy family as their Esterhazy castle until the later part of his life. This isolated him from the other composers and trends in music so that he was, as he put it, forced to become original, yet his music circulated widely, and for much of his career he was the most celebrated composer in Europe. He was a friend and mentor of Mozart and the tutor of Beethoven, and the elder brother of a composer, Michael Haydn.
Early life. St. Stephen's Cathedral in the foreground is the Kapellhaus, demolished 1804, where Haydn lived as a chorister. Joseph Haydn was born in Rohrau, Austria, a village that at that time stood on the border with Hungary. His father was Matthias Haydn, a wheelwright who also served as Marktrichter, an office akin to village mayor. Haydn's mother, Maria Nicoler, had previously worked as a cook in the palace of Count Herach, the presiding aristocrat of Rohrau. Neither parent could read music. However, Matthias was an enthusiastic folk musician, who during the journeyman period of his career had taught him to play the harp. According to Haydn's later reminiscence, his childhood family was extremely musical and frequently sang together with their neighbors. Haydn's parents had noticed that their son was musically gifted and knew that in Rohrau he would have no chance to obtain serious musical training. It was for this reason that around the time Haydn turned 6, they accepted a proposal from their relative Johann Matthias Frank, the schoolmaster and choirmaster in Hamburg, that Haydn be apprenticed to Frank in his home to train as musician. Haydn therefore went of his Frank to Hamburg, and he never again lived with his parents. Life in Frank's household was not easy for Haydn, who later remembered being frequently hungry and humiliated by the filthy state of his clothing. He began his musical training there and could soon play both harp, harpsichord and violin. The people in Hamburg heard him sing treble parts in the choir church. There is reason to think that Haydn's singing impressed those who heard him, because in 1739 he was brought to the attention of George von Ruther, the director of music in St. Stephen's Cathedral in Vienna, who happened to be visiting Hamburg and was looking for new choir boys. Haydn passed his audition with Ruther, and after several months of further training moved to Vienna, 1740, where he worked for the next 9 years as chorister. It is also popular believed that Haydn sang at the funeral of Antonio Vivaldi in 1741. Haydn lived in Kapellhaus next to the cathedral, along with Ruther, Ruther's family, and the other four choir boys, which after 1745 included his younger brother Michael. The choir boys were instructed in Latin and other school subjects as well as voice, violin, and keyboard. Ruther was of little help to Haydn in the areas of music theory and composition, giving him only 2 lessons in his entire time as choristers. However, since Stephens was one of the leading musical centers in Europe, Haydn learned a great deal simply by serving a professional musician there. Like Frank before him, Ruther did not always bother to make sure Haydn was proper fed. As he later told his biographer, Albert Christoph Dies, Haydn was motivated to sing well, in his hopes of gaining more invitation to perform before ari- aristocratic audience. where the singers were usually served refreshments.